Okay, well, we have 1 o'clock, and I'm really excited to have a great turnout so far, and more people are going to be coming on. I'm pretty confident. So let me bring everybody up to speed. We usually do our regional meetings where the executive board gets together and we travel throughout the state and have the opportunity to meet with everybody in person. And obviously, COVID has derailed that initiative this year. But there's a lot of important information that we need to bring to our members. And we felt that it was important enough to hold these town hall meetings so we can get together and we can talk. So first, I want to thank everybody for logging in. It's great to see a lot of very familiar faces and see some great names up here. I'm very proud to be a president and to be part of this. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge Mike Lenati and his professional staff at the association for everything they've done for us throughout this year. COVID and the pandemic really put a lot of threw curveballs at us and put us in some pretty tough situations. And Mike and his team did a great job with communicating with us and for us with the governor's office. We may not always agree with decisions that are made on the government level, but Mike certainly made sure that we were positioned well for success. And so I want to thank Mike and his team for helping us and then leading this town hall. So I'll turn it over to Mike Lenati. Mike.
Thanks, Bill. Very much appreciate all the kind words. Hello, everyone. See some of you, see your names for those who aren't on video. So we're looking forward to spending a little time with you today. I am going to try to use my technical skills here to share a screen with you to give you a quick overview through PowerPoint, and then we will spend most of our time having a discussion. So let's see if this works. All right, so you should be seeing my screen now. So just to give you a little bit of information, I had muted everyone at the beginning of the session just to avoid some background noise, but you have the ability to unmute yourself at any point in time during the town hall. I will also explain in just a minute on how you can ask a question or provide comment. The other thing to keep in mind, these town hall meetings are being recorded. So this will give us a chance to memorialize the conversation and also allow others in your region who aren't able to join us to be able to listen in later and hear what was discussed. We have scheduled this for an hour, but we can definitely go as long as the conversation leads us to go. So there's no time constraints on us at all. We can also go shorter than an hour if we finish what we need to talk about in that hour-long time. Before I get into the overview, just a quick shout out and thank you to the sponsors who, through their support, have helped to underwrite today's town hall meeting. So as we put out in the notice to let you know about the town hall, we are going to be talking about two topics today, paraprofessionals and alcohol in the funeral home. We will be doing that, and I will be providing this brief overview, and then we will spend the majority of our time listening to you guys and answering questions and hearing your feedback and comments. So now when we get to that point in the conversation, you will see at the bottom of your screen, you have a microphone. You can unmute yourself to ask a question. You also have the ability to raise your hand. So if you raise your hand, I will see your hand go up on the screen and I can recognize you. You also have a chat box where you can type in a question or a comment and I will read that to the group and we can let everyone hear what you have to say. And obviously that's one way to let folks know what others are thinking. When you do decide to make a comment, we just ask if you can remember to please give your name and your funeral home name so that we have that recorded as well. As Bill mentioned, the goal of this is to obtain member feedback. So we are going to spend most of our time doing that. In terms of where we are, each region starting today will be having its own town hall. We had our first this morning, and we will be concluding all of them by midweek next week. Once all the information is collected, the staff will consolidate that and present it to the association board at their upcoming December board meeting. It's very important to keep in mind that there is no desired outcome as a result of the town halls. There are no defined next steps or plans on either topic. The association has not taken a position on the issues that we will be discussing, nor have we started to research or draft legislation on either of them. Again, this is really meant to be an opportunity to get more information and feedback from our members as part of this process. So what I'd like to do is just give you an overview of kind of how we got to where we are today, where we're ready to have this conversation with you. In reality, the discussions started in 2015, not necessarily on paraprofessionals since then, but really paraprofessionals is part of the bigger funeral industry workforce issues, which we have had on our radar since 2015. The first group to take a look at this was the Funeral Service Education Task Force, which was working for about 2 years on this issue. As you can see from the screen, their goal was to strengthen and elevate funeral service now and in the future. They were focused on the areas of residency, education, and curriculum in the mortuary science schools, continuing education, and master certification. At the conclusion of their work, they came away with a couple of recommendations. One with regard to residency was to add a discernment period and increased accountability and structure for residencies. Just to give you an update on that, that is now an issue that has gone through the legislative drafting process. We have a bill drafted that we are ready to introduce to the legislature. So that'll be discussed at the Governmental Affairs Committee and board meeting in December to talk about putting on our legislative agenda. So that took a couple of years after the task force recommendation came out to get to that point. As far as education and curriculum, they had proposed a new curriculum for the mortuary science programs. And with regard to continuing education and master certification, they had recommended a new mandatory credentialing program and higher quality continuing education program review and approval regimen. So when they were done in 17, then in 2018, the current association president formed the Funeral Service 2020 Task Force. Their goal was to explore and implement new programs to ensure a bright future for funeral service in New York State. And really a lot of ways, or in part, at least in part ways, they were an expansion of the education task force work. And by that, I mean, if you look at their areas of focus, you can see it included residency and professional development. So what they really did was they took a look at this from what I'll call a more holistic approach. They actually, but you can see that circle chart, they were looking at this from the potential recruitment of high school students to the mortuary science program, all the way around to the retirees who were more in that mentorship place, and took a look at the issue of quality and quantity of the workforce. So they were working through that for a year. And then in June of 2019, they recommended to the board that through a combination of work groups, task forces, and our Bridge Commission, that each of these 5 focus areas should be addressed. As it related to paraprofessionals specifically, they recommended the creation of a task force to continue their work. And the board decided the next step before forming a task force would be to get additional member input. The original plan, as Bill alluded to, was to gather that input during the 2020 regional meetings. However, as we all know, COVID disrupted that plan and caused us to cancel those meetings. So we're very happy that we were able to put these town halls in place instead. So we're going to spend our time now really focused more on the paraprofessional work that was done by the task force. So let me just kind of frame that for you. So in arriving at their recommendations, the task force divided itself into several work groups, and they took a deeper dive into each of those 5 focus areas. The deep dive into the topic of paraprofessionals was done through a specific exercise, which I'm going to share with you now. The group was presented with an assumption scenario and asked to answer and address a specific question. And as you can see from the slide, this assumption scenario posed this hypothetical: to assume that the association received notice from the State Department of Health that due to extremely low numbers of licensed funeral directors in New York State, the Department of Health had declared this a public health issue. Assume that the department is proposing a new license or certification to be developed to address the workforce need in funeral service due to the lack of licensed funeral directors, and a determination that addressing this issue through additional newly licensed funeral directors is not feasible at this point. So the question was specifically what would the ideal job description and responsibilities be to address this? So the work group, the first step that they took in answering this question was explaining the why and then coming up with a list of what should be addressed. So saying that maybe a little differently, based on the assumption scenario, why is there a lack of funeral directors and what needs to be accounted for when creating new positions? And the group's answer to those questions you can see in this list that is included on the screen. So in looking at that, they were looking in creating new positions and answering that question to spark a career and interest in funeral service for folks, to create a pool of qualified funeral workers, to ensure that the families are protected by ensuring only people who were certified and vetted professionals would be interacting with families, to counteract the shortage of students in the mortuary science programs, to respond to growing demands of families and to better serve their needs, to respond to funerals being more involved and requiring more event planning and similar services, to provide an option for small funeral homes who might not have the resources, might be cost prohibitive, say, to hire another full-time funeral director, to help relieve some of the front and back of the house operations that owners and managers are dealing with, to supplement the availability of funeral service professionals, to enhance the role of a licensed funeral director, as they would be the ones overseeing any certified positions, and then to prevent burnout of licensed funeral directors by helping to create more work-life balance. So those were the things that they were trying to address as they looked at answering that question and creating the ideal position description based on this assumption that we were asking them to work through. And in doing that, so once they had the why and the what determined, then they had to answer the how. And the how is really what new positions should they consider or can they consider? And what they decided to do was explore two positions, one that we've dubbed the certified funeral assistant and one dubbed the certified funeral arranger. The key word to focus on in this slide is the word explored. So again, I just want to reinforce the task force recommendation was to form another task force to continue the work on this topic that they had started. They did not recommend creating any specific positions. However, they did put a lot of time, thought, and discussion towards this. And that's what we want to share with you now. It's going to give us a place to further this conversation and provide a reference point for your feedback. So let me walk you through these two positions and the framework that they looked at.
Yeah, we'll put it.
Just a reminder, can you please, please mute yourself?
We'll put it in there. If you have any questions, please contact the funeral. How's that sound? And I'm going to do that right now. It'll be done in no time.
Excuse me, whoever's speaking on the phone, can you please mute yourself just so that there's not the background noise? Thank you. So looking at the proposed duties of the certified funeral assistant, this was really intended to be akin to what you'll see as paraprofessionals in, say, the dental industry or the legal profession. Somebody in the other call actually also brought it up that it's a similar parallel exists in the nursing industry. So the duties that they talked about including were that the person would have to work under the direct supervision of a licensed funeral director. They would only be allowed to be employed by one funeral home at a time. They would have the ability to sign out and transfer the deceased from the place of death, to assist the licensed funeral director with preparation, dressing, and casketing, which are commonly known as the hands-on duties. But they would not be allowed to transport the decedent to the place of final disposition. They would not be allowed to to direct or supervise services or interment or in disinterment. They could not sign or amend death certificates. They could not embalm, nor could they conduct arrangements either at need or pre-need. That was a piece that would be discussed in the next position. As far as getting certified, they talked about having an 8 to 12 hour pre-certification training program that would then culminate with the successful passing of a state recognized exam. The certification would be issued by the Department of Health. Like you do today, these certified positions would have to be recertified every 2 years by going through continuing education. And they would recommend or that OSHA and ethics be required courses for this position. As it relates to the certified funeral arranger, some similar aspects to the duties. Again, only being able to work under the direct supervision of a licensed funeral director, employed by one funeral home at a time. They would be able to make arrangements, collect vital information, coordinate and schedule final disposition, arrange for the care, preparation, and transportation of the deceased, and also discuss and sell merchandise and services. However, only licensed funeral directors would be allowed to continue to sign contracts, sign or amend death certificates, or embalm. So those would not be duties extended to this certified position. In terms of becoming certified and keeping that certification, there was discussion about a 20-hour pre-certification program, which would include 25 hands-on arrangements under the direct supervision of a licensed funeral director, an overview of the embalming process, passing that state exam and recertification every 2 years, definitely including ethics as a required component, but the other required components, as well as the number of credits per biennium, were things that were still to be determined. So that was the framework for the two positions that the group worked on. Again, sharing that with you as a starting point for our conversation today. There was one other piece of information, though, that the task force had asked for right before they made their recommendation to the board. So we were looking for member feedback. So in May of 2019, we did a survey and asked the members specific questions as it relates to this. I know we had shared the results back then, but it's been over a year, so we just wanted to reiterate some of that with you. As you can see here, this was the breakdown. We had 239 folks reply. We had 40% of them were licensed directors, and I shouldn't say just licensed, but non-owner, non-manager licensed directors. You can see the breakdown of the owners and managers who replied as well. So we had asked those members, has your funeral home experienced a shortage of qualified licensed funeral directors available for hire? You can see the breakdown there. Just under 44% said they did. About 30% said no, and another 26 said that they had not needed to hire recently. We also asked them if they were concerned about the future workforce of funeral service in New York State. And you can see here that a good 3/4 of them said yes. Only 13% said no, and another 10.5% hadn't really thought about it at that point in time. We had provided information about what the task force was working on in terms of looking at other aspects to the current licensing structure in New York State. So we asked them in general about that, if they thought it was a worthwhile effort for the association to continue to explore this topic. As you can see, just about half of those respondents said yes, 40% said no, and another 11% were unsure. So almost a 50-50 split, but half of them definitely saying we should look at it. We then dove into those two positions and asked what they thought about the ones that we just discussed with you. You can see just over 50% said they definitely thought we should be looking at the funeral service assistant. Another 37% said no, and another 11% were unsure. When we got to the certified arranger, that was a different split. You can see 35% saying we should continue to explore it, 55% saying no, and another 11% saying they were unsure. So a lot of splits, with regard to this. Other than this position that was asked about, a lot of it was almost 50-50. So enough for us to continue to explore this and to continue the conversation with our members. And then just before we get into the discussion, I will also just briefly let you know about where we stand right now with alcohol in the funeral home. That was looked at as an expansion, or is being looked at as a potential expansion of the food and beverage law. The issue came up during last year's Governmental Affairs Committee meeting in December, and the context it was brought up in was the ability for someone to offer a champagne toast in honor of the deceased, things that were being more routinely asked for, but because of the laws, not something you could offer. But that was really the extent of that conversation. It didn't go much beyond that at that point. And quite frankly, with everything else that we had going on with COVID and other things, really have had no further action taken or due diligence conducted at this point on that particular topic. But again, wanted to make sure that we were putting it out there as something that we were talking about with you today. So that is the summary of what we wanted to share with you. So but again, as I said, I really want to spend the bulk of our time hearing from you guys and what you think about this concept, the potential framework that was drafted, the pros, the cons. Do you see other things that we might maybe should be doing as alternatives to this? So really open it up to you for any of your comments and feedbacks and questions. So as a reminder, you can type something in the chat box. You can just speak into the microphone. If you'd like to raise your hand, I will find that and then just let you know that you can speak, so we can try it. If you just want to unmute yourself and speak, it should be a small enough group that we shouldn't have too much overlap. But at this point, I'll stop and I will open it up to any comments, questions from the group. Dave, yep.
So during COVID, we were given deputization for the paraprofessionals, and we did, just to share our experience with it. During that time, we had 2 people deputized, and I can say they were invaluable to help us get through that time. Nothing went wrong. Nobody complained. In fact, we got many positive comments from families about how compassionate the 2 individuals were. One was a retired fireman, so he had EMT training, and one was actually a student that just recently graduated from school. So just based on our experience, I can say some of the fears that some of us might have had, we didn't realize any of that, and then nothing but positives for that. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents to that.
Thank you, Dave. I can tell you that when we first talked about getting together with everyone at the regional meetings in the spring, this was all in the abstract. There was no real live experience with regard to this. We realize now that those deputized agents definitely provided some level of hands-on experience for our members around the state as it related to probably more closer to the funeral assistant position that we outlined. So we have heard a lot of things, mostly positive about that position. Something I mentioned on the last call or last town hall, just to let you know, as you know, we got that authority through an executive order. There are some executive orders that still exist. One of them being the ability to have sign things electronic signatures, and also licensed funeral directors from other states can still come in to help. The one piece that was stopped was the ability to have those deputized agents who were non-licensed individuals. That was really driven by the Department of and the Bureau of Funeral Directing. There were some instances where there were not the people who the department's feeling should have been deputized. And in our conversations with them, it's not that they were opposed to it. They just felt that without any additional guidance and training, it was important to do during the height of the pandemic, but they were concerned about who was being chosen to be deputized. So again, the process that we're talking about would have a certification process approved by the state, a different process, more details and work done around it. So I just wanted to let you know, that was where we are right now in terms of the department. Obviously, they would have to be someone who would want at least to be take no position, but hopefully be supportive of that. And I don't think that there's opposition to it. It's just that we would, again, in working with our members, come up with the best possible framework for that to present to them, because obviously having them on our side would be important.
Can I?
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to apologize for not having my computer on mute. I did an old guy thing, and I'm sorry for that.
No problem.
Anyhow, I just want to piggyback what my brother said. One of the things that we did, nobody knew how this was going to go, and we went to an A-B schedule. And literally, so you'd work 4 days, when you kill yourself, and then you'd be off 4 days, but without having the people who were deputized to come in, I don't know how we'd have gotten through it. And, by fire, you learn, and we were thrown into the fire. We're nitpicking, and we're crazy nitpicking with what we do and how we do it. And to David's point, not only did everything go well, as we're scratching our head during this saying, man, oh man, this would really, with the right training, with the right people, this would really help, shore up our future in terms of being able to assist people. Something as simple as going to the crematory. Everything's all done. The paperwork's done. The medallion were placed. They're driving, but it's an hour. And it's an hour that quite honestly, we've learned that a funeral director that doesn't necessarily need to be the one doing it. So, I would say, we went through it, and if we didn't think that it was a good thing, we'd be the first to tell you what a disaster it was. And matter of fact, it was anything but a disaster. It was awesome.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Other comments, questions?
Mike,
Yes, hey, Don.
hi, Don Kalick Funeral Home. Yeah, I would echo just what was said. I did deputize a couple people and we did utilize them. Things worked very well. And I would agree. I think it's something definitely worth continually pursuing to do just like what was described. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Hey, Mike, this is Krista Busby.
Hi, Krista.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. I'm having some internet connection trouble.
Nope, you're coming through loud and clear.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Just to sort of piggyback on what's been said, I wholeheartedly support both of these propositions, and I certainly think they're both worth exploring further. You know, I think we're incredibly naive if we think that there are tons of qualified candidates to choose from. There are several openings every day. And that's just going to continue as we start to age out. There's nobody going to school. So if we have these qualified part-time associates or people that we can train in-house and get them to do this, I think that's a wonderful opportunity. As far as alcohol goes, you know, I completely get both sides, but again, you know, at Halloran's we have a room. I know there's some other people within the county who have pursued the catering option, and it's not unheard of for the families to say, hey, you know, it would have been great if we could have had some wine or something, and we're losing some opportunities there. So I think that's something we have to consider too, you know, with some regulation, but I just think that as an industry, we'd be missing out on that because we're crazy to think that these people aren't going to those banquet facilities, to those restaurants, to those hotels where they can do that.
Thank you. Others? Comments on either position? Is there something else you want us to be looking at? Comments on the alcohol and funeral home? Mike, yes.
Yeah, so to kind of echo what Krista said, you know, and I think we've all been there. It's the country clubs getting a funeral now. It's the restaurants getting a funeral now, and we're being asked to be the direct disposal. And you know, we have 3 very different buildings, everyone. One which I would be challenged to offer coffee in, another one I can offer coffee in, another one that we've got a banquet room in. So I get what everybody's individual concerns would be, but as funerals change and as we're laying out less, giving ourselves the opportunity to insert ourselves where the Marriott is or the country club is, you know, a simple glass of wine does that. And I think, yeah, regulation's important. I get it. But we're not being able to compete on a level playing field. And I think the alcohol being allowed with some regulation opens the doors open for us in a way that right now we're handcuffed.
Thank you, Bill. Mike?
Mike, Bill D'Angelo, Martin Funeral Home in Mount Morris.
Hi, Bill. Bill, we're having a hard time hearing you. It's the connection.
I like the idea of both of the new work pool. I'll type in my question, Mike.
Oh, okay, thank you. Mike Pareto, I know did you have an additional comment or, oh, you're back on mute. Okay. I know we have somebody typing. Kevin, please, yes. Hold on, let me take you off of mute. Oh, you got to take yourself off mute.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Sorry, I did the old guy thing, like much. Yeah, getting back to the pair is, I certainly agree with the steps that we would like to be done with a little bit of education, so on and so forth. I know a couple of firms, no names obviously, that have, when the governor came down and gave us permission to do that, some of them took it like a little vacation. You know, I don't want to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll let them do it. Even though their workload really didn't dictate that, they kind of abuse it as far as I'm concerned. I'm glad that the research has been done. Listen, if we go this paralegal thing or paraprofessional, you would take that extra step to do education and learning and so on and so forth. So I'm in total agreement with that. I just don't want the ones that are going to abuse it just for the sake of, I don't want to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning. So just taking that extra step, I think, is important. So that's good.
Thank you. Phil?
Mike, just keep in mind, at one time with us old guys, there used to be 3 different licenses. And there's nothing wrong with the firm having an awful lot of hands-on with their employees and wanting them to do things right to keep their everything that they've done up to this point uh, in a very acceptable situation. I'm obviously for the paraprofessionals. And please let me mention one other thing quickly.
Sure.
When it comes to alcohol in the funeral home, as the boys have mentioned, we before COVID, we offered food in the funeral homes to families that wanted to do that, and they were very highly accepted. As far as alcohol is concerned, that's entirely up to however it's going to come out. But please, anybody that, I think we should make it very plain from an association side that if you're going to do food or alcohol in the funeral home, call your insurance company, make sure you're covered, because if not, your liability could take and ruin you. You have to be very careful about that.
Thanks, Phil. That was brought up also on the previous town hall. Another piece that was brought up with regard to the paraprofessional aspect was kind of hand in glove, and that was enforcement and just ensuring that we are working with the Bureau and the Department of Health to ensure that we have the proper resources at the state level to ensure that the enforcement is taking place that needs to take place, so that you have those new positions potentially in place, but there's oversight so that it's not being abused. And that would be part of, helping work through the Bureau, some of the concerns that they had in the front end. So definitely something that we would consider to, include in any type of proposal that would come down the line as part of the solution.
To follow up with Kevin's position, Kevin, thanks for sharing that, the concern, and that's actually the concern of many is whether or not there are abuses. So what we have now, what we do know is that there are people that are working in and around the funeral profession that are not licensed. They're interlopers, and they are skirting the restrictions that we work under, the law that we work under, and there's no enforcement for them because they're not licensed funeral directors. So Tom Fuller in his office, they can't impose any restrictions on them. They would have to go to the Attorney General for these people that are holding these death cafes and things like that. So that's important to us. And so thank you for mentioning that, Kevin. In addition to that, with regards to alcohol, 46 out of the 50 states currently allow alcohol consumption in the funeral home. 49 of the 50 states allowed food and beverage in the funeral home. So it is not something that's new. Would be and should be new to New York, but it is an option for families throughout our nation to have a glass of wine with a meal or a champagne toast, something like that as well. So I just wanted to provide you that information and then that support.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions from anybody on the town hall?
Mike, this is Adam over at Alva Halloran and Son here in Rochester.
Hi, Adam.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. We do a lot of catering and stuff with our families, and I can think of a ton of times where families would have loved to have had some kind of toast or something like that as far as alcohol is concerned. So I'm very much in favor of that. And I'm a one-man location, so I could definitely see the benefits of having a paraprofessional kind of situation, which would be very helpful, because I'm the one that gets up in the middle of the night, and I'm the one that meets the family first thing in the morning or has the funeral first thing, So it's definitely something I'm for. Just a couple questions on that, though. Would there be restrictions as to what kinds of removals these people could make? Would they be able to make just at facilities, hospitals, nursing homes? Would they make house calls? What kind of things are we looking at with that moving forward?
So there had not been the level of discussion to that part of detail. Just in general, the idea of, or the concept of being able to do removals was something that the group that discussed this felt that they would be allowed to do. So I don't think there was any distinction or limitation that the group had originally thought of. But again, the idea behind this would be if there are differences and skill sets that would be required based on the location that the removal is taking place, then those would want to be discussed through any additional conversations to make sure that whatever we would go forward with would be tailored in a way that, you know, a majority of our members are going to support. So there was no original discussion about limiting that at this point in time. So if there's concerns you have about, or things you want us to consider with regard to a type of removal or from a certain place, if you'd be willing to share that, that would be great, just so that we know that we're taking it into consideration.
Well, I'm for it all, actually, but just wondered if anybody else had any thoughts on that, or had any discussions had been held on that.
So no discussions thus far, but if anybody else has any thoughts, please, Bill, please.
Yeah, so Adam, you know, there's been, you know, some discussions on you know, one of them that was important was a removal, transfer from an airport as well. And I will say this, you know, part of my position and like the presidents that have come before is to get a good understanding of what's beneficial for our profession throughout the state, and what may be less important down in the New York City metropolitan area may very well be more important up in the central part of New York, or the northern part of New York, or western New York. And I think that that's important as well. So when I have the opportunity to speak with different members throughout our state, it's important that we're all aware of what certain benefits may be. And even though you know, this appears to be that it would be beneficial to your business and the balance, you know, quality of life as well for you. And just know that that's our position, is ensuring that your voice is also heard throughout the state, that this could be something that would benefit you and your family and your profession, your business. And it's equally important for everyone. So thank you, Adam. And if there's something specific, you know, please feel free to let us know in writing, and so we can share that as we speak. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. Thank you. Don, just before I turn it over to you, I was remiss, I didn't read Bill D'Angelo's chat that he entered. So let me just read that for you guys. Bill writes, I am in favor of both positions as a single person operation. I believe this will not only help me, but it would help everyone. It will introduce new people into the business. With the rate of cremation and loss of income from traditional funerals, these positions could streamline costs for the owner. Also, someone in this position could be a possible owner of a funeral home with a licensed manager as their employee. As a single person operation trying to sell their business, there is not many young funeral directors wanting the responsibility to work that hard by themselves. So thank you, Bill, for giving us that feedback. Don, if you have an additional comment, please.
Yeah, sure. What you just read is very well said, and I agree with that too. But I was going to add about alcohol. I do agree that we should be looking into allowing that. I mean, I think anytime the state of New York tells us something we can't do and others can do, just ties our hands. And, you know, and the opportunity should be there for us to be able to do that. So I think definitely it's worth looking into with the appropriate, you know, rules and regulations. I might add about the person or persons that might do removals. You were just talking about different scenarios. I think the simpler way that we do this would be better. So, I mean, I think it should be all removals and just have the appropriate training to go along with that versus trying to single out certain removals or certain deliveries. I think monitoring these individuals is going to be difficult. It's difficult now. I mean, being on the Pennsylvania border here right now, I can pretty much assure you and prove to you that we have funeral directors coming from other states, including Pennsylvania, that are doing burials in the New York cemeteries that are not New York licensed. You mention it to the cemetery and they say, well, we're not too concerned about it. They show up, we bury them. We have hospitals in this area. Same scenario happens. They come from Pennsylvania, not licensed in New York. They're allowed to make removals. You know, so monitoring this is going to be difficult because it basically already happens now when it shouldn't be, unfortunately.
Thank
Just a
you.
couple thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else like to offer any feedback?
I'd like to just comment. This is Michael Collins from the Gray Funeral Home in Rochester.
Hi, Michael.
Yeah, I just graduated from Hudson Valley a couple of years ago, and I went through the program, and we started off with 40 students and ended. I think I graduated with 6. I just don't want this to diminish a license first, and I don't want it to make that class of 40 turn into 10 because people can say I can go get a 12 credit or a 12-hour class and go do removals, and all I want to do is hang around the funeral home and have a position and try it out. The idea that someone could own a funeral home and then have a license operating the funeral home is something I think is a terrible idea, to be honest. But I just don't want it to diminish our licenses and the work that we've put in and all the education we've gone through for someone to take a 12-hour course and 4 credits biannually, and they can do all the same things we can except sign a contract and embalm. So just want to consider something from the other side there. I think it's a great idea to offer something like this and to have the extra help. But I don't want to lose out on licenses as well at the same time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? We're about almost about quarter of the hour. As I mentioned in the beginning, we could stay as long or as short as the conversation let us. I think most folks on, or the majority of the folks on the call or on the town hall have provided comment, which is great. But I don't want to cut it short either. So if there's anything with regard to anything else you'd like to talk about with regard to these topics, or quite frankly, since we have you guys together, if there's anything else on your minds with regard to anything going on that you'd like to ask us about, feel free to do so, since we have you captive and you have us captive. So feel free to fire away. All right.
Oh, actually, real
Yep,
quick,
Kevin.
Mike.
Hey, Kevin. Go ahead.
Yeah, good. I'm not on mute anymore. You had mentioned, I think yesterday, a little bit about, and you might want to let everybody else know, something about the governor might look at our particular region and areas. I don't know if you'd like to,
Sure.
just point that out again for, knowledge for everybody.
Yep, absolutely. So as you all know, everyone has been grouped in, this is part of the COVID response. Everyone's been grouped into regions, and up until very recently, decisions about what would be opened, potentially closed, any restrictions, relaxation of restrictions would all be based on a regional basis. However, about a week and a half ago, the governor announced what he called hotspots in several locations. One was around the Binghamton area. Most of the others, yep, Kevin, most of the others were downstate. It was basically not even, it was even more specific than zip code demographics. It was block by block, where based on high COVID positive rates, there was a decision made to shut down, for lack of a better phrase, activity in those hotspot zones. The center of the activity is called the red zone. It expands out around in a ring of orange, and then another ring of yellow, and then it goes back to green. If you're in a red zone right now, it really goes all the way back to phase 1, where it's, no non-essential, 10 people maximum in any gathering, really trying to limit the exposure of COVID in those areas. And then as you go out by ring, it goes a little more expansive. So it's like thinking about phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you're 1 in red, 2 in orange, 3 in yellow, back to where we are most of the state in green is 4. The governor just announced that he is going to look at this model across the entire state through the fall and winter. So as hotspots pop up, there will be these zones created, cluster zones, where they will curtail activity for a 2-week period at a minimum to try to get the positive rates down. So this is I guess in some ways you can look at it as good news because it's with using a scalpel to try to really hone in on where those issues arise and not disrupt an entire region. But we have already had some calls from members who, you might have been on the west side of the street and you're in a red zone, and you're on the east side of the street and you're in an orange zone. And that's the difference between, only 10 people coming to the funeral home to do a service or 25. So, and as you guys know from what you went through, it's going to have an impact, especially in smaller gatherings. So we are monitoring it. We really are just along for the ride when it comes to this one. But that is something that's going to be a piece that we have to keep an eye on as we get into the fall and winter months, because it is definitely we're expecting the rates to go up in terms of positive COVID cases. I don't know if you've all seen just what was announced today in terms of the 3-state travel advisory initiative. Parts of New Jersey and Connecticut have seen very high increases in their COVID positive test results. However, the governor has decided not to require quarantining from people who are traveling between the 3 states still. Felt it would be too difficult because of the borders. However, like for example, in Pennsylvania, where you have a border, a pretty long border, as a matter of fact, they're not part of that advisory. So you're going to have, transporting back and forth, and you still have to quarantine if you're from Pennsylvania. So it's going to be, I think, more difficult as we get into the later fall and early winter months in terms of dealing with this. So we're working on it still. We're in constant communication with the stakeholders and the decision makers to ensure that we're keeping funeral service in the front burner, and that they're keeping us in mind as they're making decisions, because we're trying to do everything we can to continue to be safe, but to allow you to help your families the best way you can. So there'll be more coming out on that. We're actually thinking about holding a fall COVID call probably after the town halls, just to give everyone an update on where things are, and just to kind of give a look into what might be coming down the pike in the winter, and what we're going to be keeping an eye on for you. But if there's any other questions about COVID, obviously we're happy to answer that. Don, yes.
I'll just add, while we were talking here, I just received a text that apparently the governor has put a portion of my county, Chemung County, myself and where Kevin is. Some of us are in orange and some of us are in yellow now.
Okay, so you've moved down, which is good news. So again, unfortunately, it's not the kind of thing that goes away as quickly as it shows up. It's kind of a gradual decrease and relaxation of the standards. And I guess, like I said, you can look at it half glass full, that it's a small area, not even a zip code. So if you're lucky enough not to be in the red zone, you're fortunate. But on the flip side, if you are in a red zone, you're really at a potential competitive disadvantage for that 2-week period at a minimum. So a difficult spot for you guys. I totally understand. Anyone else? Anything at all you'd like to bring up?
Like, I just wanted to just introduce myself to those who do not know me. I'm Bob Hogan, the treasurer of NYSFDA from Quinn Fogarty Funeral Home in Flushing, New York. And it's great being with everyone. It's good to see the folks that I do know, and I look forward to being together and meeting you folks personally one of these days when things get better, hopefully in the near future. And I do agree with everything that most folks have said. With the paraprofessional and the removal specialist, I do see probably the need for it and where it will be helpful. But I do also agree with the training, definitely training, making sure we're not losing anything in the professional standards that we have. And we do offer catering as well, and having that little winery, champagne toast, and again, leveling the playing field, as everyone is saying, and making it, easy and comfortable for the families. I agree with everything that's been said so far. And again, also not, diminishing our licenses. That's also very important as well.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you. Bill D'Angelo also added another comment. He stated the value of the funeral director's license should be more valued now. Currently, licensed funeral homes owned by corporations in the state can be made up by non-licensed as long as the business is managed by a licensed funeral director. At least with these positions, there is certification and licensing of these individuals. Sorry for the internet connection issues. So no worries, Bill. Thank you for taking the time to type your comments, and sorry that it was giving you problems. All right. So anything else? Going once? Going twice?
Mike,
Yes.
Jim Gray, Rochester, New York, Gray
Jim.
Funeral Home. Quick question. I agree with everything that's been said today for the most part. My question is, as an owner of a funeral home, are we skirting the issue of residents? Because if I find myself in need of additional help and I can hire a paraprofessional at $15 an hour, but I'm going to pay a resident $35,000, $40,000 an hour, which of those would you pick? And my
Are you
question,
saying, are you saying that it would be harmful to residents because they would not be chosen over the paraprofessional position?
that's exactly what I'm saying, because quite frankly, if you have a paraprofessional and they're able to do all those things which mimic what a resident could do, why would you hire a resident?
Yeah, so I know that was a concern expressed by others, both on the task force and just those that we've had conversations with. Obviously, part of that balance that some other folks have talked about, I think one of the things that's come through loud and clear is even if, as folks find value in a position like this, that there is that overriding concern that any structure that's created to add something new should not take away from the current structure. If anything, it needs to enhance what currently is being done. So that's the balancing act, and why we're asking for this feedback now to help with any further, if we're going to continue this conversation, the final formula, so to speak, has to make sure that you are balancing both of those things. So I don't have an answer for you at this point as to how that's done, but I can answer the question in terms of are we skirting the issue? Definitely not. Definitely a piece that has been brought up and something that ultimately would have to be addressed effectively before we were able to move forward. I don't know if that answers your question, though.
It does for the most part. And
Okay.
one other thought, if you would,
Sure.
as a former tradesman from many years ago, in upstate New York here, there's a lot of people out there that make a living doing trade work. And if we were to go to these paraprofessionals, it's going to be great for a lot of people. But these people out there that are trying hard to make a living doing trade work, I'm afraid that their livings might go south. So not looking for a response. I'm just putting that out there.
Nope, appreciate it. And again, all I can tell you is definitely another aspect to a new position created that was discussed. Population centers downstate, a lot of trade availability. There were rural parts of the state where folks said we don't have an adequate supply of trade folks. So it was kind of a split. Everyone recognized the concern, some more firsthand than others, but definitely something that's been brought up already. But appreciate you bringing it up again.
Thank you much.
Thank you. All right, we're about 5 minutes to approaching 2. Happy to keep going if anybody has any more comments or questions, but I'll leave that up to you guys. So one last throw out any other questions, comment. All right. I don't see anything in the chat box. I don't see anybody else looking to comment. The only thing I would like, well, first I'd like to thank you all for taking the time and providing all this valuable feedback. I also want to let you know that doesn't stop here. This is the beginning of the next round of conversations with our members. As I mentioned earlier, we will be having the rest of the regional town halls throughout through middle of next week. I think it's next Thursday they'll conclude. And in the meantime, as we collect information, if you think of something after this call that you would like to share with us, feel free to reach out to us. You can email me with anything that you would like to share. It's easy to reach me. Just my email address is mike@nysfda.org. So feel free to reach out with any additional questions, comments, feedbacks, pros, cons, anything you can think of. The goal is to gather as much information as possible so that we make the best decision possible as we move forward in talking about any change that might be down the pike. So with that, before I sign off for everybody, I will turn it back over to our president. Bill, if you have any final comments.
Mike, thank you very much. And once again, Mike, great job leading this conversation. I want to thank everybody once again for their participation. And I just want to share some information that was also discussed as well. And I know Mr. Gray, Mr. Collins expressed concern about the license. It is our state association's position to always protect our funeral director's license because that is what's valuable to us. But if there's a way that we could enhance or elevate our license or our profession, we're also, focused on doing that as well. And when we see or discuss the concept or the idea of a paraprofessional, we think of it as also the paralegal. So a paralegal doesn't devalue the attorney. A medical, whether it is a nurse or an LPN, does not devalue the doctor. And that's how we're perceiving this and really how we propose it. If we compared this concept of this person who can make transfers for us, it would not, if someone is on a path to becoming a funeral director, this person is not that one. It is a resident that is absolutely on the path to becoming a funeral director. That resident can make transfers. That resident can embalm, under the direction of a licensed funeral director. That a resident can sit in on arrangements. The resident can go to a place of disposition. So it is important that we know, and everybody knows, that we value the position of a funeral director at the highest level. And then the resident beyond that path to the licensed funeral director. This idea, this concept of a funeral service assistant to help with transfers is just that. It's de-minimized, and it's only there to help that funeral director that needs it, that funeral home that needs it. And like food and beverage, like alcohol, it's only good for the funeral home that it benefits. And so my position is, as I mentioned earlier, is to ensure that if there's a benefit for funeral homes throughout the state to have a specific position or to allow for alcohol, I support all of them. And but the most important position is to ensure that our license is maintained and valued. And again, thank you all so very much for participating with us today. And we look forward to pursuing additional dialogue with everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to my board for being on with us today. I'm so very proud to be a funeral director and to be president of our association.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody. Again, this is the beginning of the next stages of the conversation, so keep those comments and questions coming as you think of them. Again, as Bill said, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.